Good evening, morning, depending where you are. I'm broadcasting from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So a lot of people here on the Zoom, they're back in Washington, D.C. So wherever you are, if it's evening for you, morning for us, here it's Sotah Daf Lamedawat, the Daf Yomi being broadcast from Saudi Arabia, but we're only going to make it available after we get out. We'll put it on unlisted on YouTube if you want to find it until then. So the pasuk tells us that the Kohanim were bringing the Aron Abris, the Ark of the Covenant, into the land of Canaan, across the Jordan River. So it says in the verse, "Ukiva'o nosei Aron ada Yarden, vayamdu hamayim hayardim melmala kamu neid." So the water which was standing above them stood up like a pillar. Neid echad, v'kama govan shamayim. How high was this? How high? We're in Sotah Daf Lamed, Sotah 34. How high was the water? Shnei masar mil al shnei masar mil. The water was 12 mil by 12 mil. Kineged Machanei Yisrael, corresponding to all of Israel. All of Israel had a camp of 12 mil by 12 mil, and that's how much the waters went high so that everybody could walk across. That's how the waters, when they crossed the Jordan, that's how high they were. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Lidvarecha, according to you, Adam Kalu Mayim Kalim, what's quicker, the man or the water? Because it must be, so I'm going to ask Professor Kohler, because we're focusing on the splitting of the sea and Har Sinai today, but today's daf is talking about the crossing of the Jordan. Crossing of the Jordan gets a lot less press usually in the Jewish state schools, but this is what they're talking about, the crossing of the Jordan. And actually tomorrow's daf Yomi, where we will broadcast the God willing from Har Sinai, actually talks about Har Sinai on tomorrow's daf Yomi. So it says, how long did it take them to cross? It says that went 12 mil high. So the Gemara asks the question, what's water? What's quicker, water or humans? It must be water is faster. Everybody knows that water is faster than humans. In Cain, well, the water will get to 12 mil high. By the time it gets to 12 mil high, they can't get across because the water would recede. So the water kept going higher and higher. A kippah is a dome. So it went domes upon domes. Yes, or mishalosh meos mil. The water went higher than 300 mil. All the people in the east and the west. So what's the east and what's the west here? If we're in the Jordan and we're looking at the crossing, the east presumably means, I don't know, it could be either way. All the people on either side of the Jordan saw it. As it states, the Amori are on the other side of the Jordan. They're on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And and all the kings of the Canaanites who were on the sea, that was on the other side, they're on the western bank, they heard it. They heard that Hashem had dried up the Jordan in front of the children of Israel, ad Avram, until they passed over, and their hearts melted, and they didn't have od ruach bnei Israel. They didn't have any more spirit in front, before the Jewish people. Va'af Rachav Azona Amra, and also Rachav the harlot, also she said to the Shulchay Yoshua, she said to the people that Joshua sent, Ki shamanu et asher hovisha Hashem et mei Yam Suf. We heard that Hashem had dried up the Yam Suf. The Ksiv, and it says, V'nishma v'yimas levavenu lo kama od. And it says, we heard this and our hearts melted. Okay, so now we're discussing what happened when they were in the Jordan. Odom Yardin, they're standing in the Jordan. And Amrlam Yeshua, Joshua says to them, you should have to understand why you're crossing over the Jordan. I'm going to lower my voice for this. You need to, basically inherit everybody else. As it says, I'm not going to translate that. Now, if you do that, mutav, good. If you do your job, defeat the Canaanites, great. Otherwise, the water will come the shotfin osechem. And the Gemara does something very unusual. Usually it makes an inference from the verse, but here there's no verse that says osechem, so it's the bride, so they're inferring. My osechem, osivaschem. What's going to happen is it's going to destroy me and you, God, or Joshua is saying. Odam b'Yarden, they're still in the Jordan. Amar and Yoshua, Joshua says, Harimu lachem ish shemen achas al shechmo. Joshua takes 12 people, there are 12 men, and he says, each one of you should put a stone on your shoulder, l'mispar shetei Yisrael, corresponding to the tribes of Israel. Uksiv l'manti azos os b'kirbachem. So there shall be a sign in your midst. Joshua is commanding them while they're in the Jordan to take a stone. And what are they supposed to do with this stone? It'll be a sign. Ki shalom b'nechem machar le'mor. When your children will say to you, Ma avanim hayelochem, what are these stones? Silman lebanim, it will be a sign for your children, she'avru avos as a yarden, that your ancestors passed over the Jordan. Hodam b'yarden, they're still in the Jordan. And while they were still in the Jordan, Joshua says, Amar and Yoshua, su achem mizeh mitoch hayarden, take another stone from the feet of the Yarden, mimatzav raglei hakohanim, from the feet of the Kohanim, hachen shtei masrei avanim, take 12 stones, v'avartem osam imachem, and take them with you, v'hinachtem, and when you take these stones, v'hinachtem osam b'malon asher talinu bo alayla, you're going to place them in the place where you sleep tonight. Yachal b'kol malon malon, I think you have to put stone in every place you sleep. Says the Talmud asher talinu bo alayla, where you sleep tonight. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Abba v'chafta v'Rabbi Elazar ben Maaseh v'Chananya ben Chakinai, they they stood on those stones. There's something that happens a few times. By the way, it never says in the Gemara. A few times in the Gemara it says we were in the desert. One time it says we saw the place where Korach's hole was. That's what one verse. He says I was walking with an Arab and he showed me. He shows you couldn't trust the local Bedouins. He said he showed us where Korach's hole was, where Korach was swallowed up. There's another reference. I forgot that Gemara. Will ask Betzalel in a few minutes. So remind me exactly what else it says there. But it does say. Yeah, David, you had a question?
No, finish your sentence and then I'll ask.
Okay, it does say. So it does say where Korach's the hole of Korach, but it doesn't say where Mount Sinai was. Nowhere in the Gemara that I remember does it say we went to Mount Sinai and this is where it was. In fact, the only one who goes to Har Sinai after Moshe Rabbeinu is Eliyahu Hanavi. No, I don't remember a phrase. If you can look at Aaron, you're going to search it. It says Har Sinai. Well, Aaron's going to check it. This is the good news. The good news is I'm with a bunch of scholars on this trip, and they're going to tell me every time I say a misstatement. Yes. David, you had a question?
So the reference to these stones that Joshua instructs the people to bring, for those of us who went with Rabbi Hertzfeld to Selma, Alabama, and crossed over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when you cross over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, there's a small park where there are 12 stones and a monument that is dedicated to the people who led the march, including John Lewis, with specifically that quote from the book of Joshua.
Beautiful.
Rabbi Rick.
Outstanding. I love that. It all comes together, all of our trips. I even forgot about that trip. So then the states, so they said, I stood on those stones, and we determined that each one of those stones weighed 40 sah. 40 sah is an enormous amount of weight. You could think about it. It's the volume of a mikvah. Like 40 sah is what's kosher mikvah. You ever try picking up the amount of water in a mikvah? It's impossible. But the Gemiri, and we have a tradition, the tu'una de madli inchila kasfe, that something that a person carries. Oh, did I get it wrong? So, oh, you're right. I messed up the Gemara. The Gemara, it says above Basra, Ayin Dalet, it says that he says, I will show you where Mount Sinai is. I went and I saw scorpions that were encircling it, and they were standing as high as white donkeys. Wow. Oh, so we're going to look for that today. I heard a divine voice saying, woe is me that I took an oath, and now that I took the oath, who will nullify it for me? Wow. So we're going to see today, we'll probably see scorpions, and they were standing who was standing as high as white donkeys? The scorpions were the size of white donkeys. Oh, geschmack. All right. Shkoyach, Reb Aaron. Okay, so by the way, we're not afraid of scorpions or white donkeys. Anyway, so he says we have a tradition that I'm so glad you made that. That's the only time. By the way, that's the only time in the Gemara. That's the exception that proves the rule. One person goes, and that's it. Just once, and that's it. Nobody else went. And okay, anyway, that's whenever you make a mistake, you say, well, that's the exception that proves the rule. Okay, so he says, so this was, we have a tradition. A person can carry on their shoulder 1/3 of what they can carry that if two people put it on them or other people put it on them. From here, we could figure out how they were able to carry the cluster of grapes that the Meraglim took back from Canaan. As it says, they carried it on a moat, on a pole, with two. So Mimashma should never be a moat. A pole is obviously two. So why does it have to say two? They had two motos. They had two poles that they were carrying the grapes on. And Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, tortini v'tortini de tortini. So Rashi explains what this means is there's at least three major explanations of this. We're just going to say Rashi's for Daf Yomi. Rashi says there were two people carrying poles, and on top of those poles, there were poles diagonally going across from it. And so therefore, since these two poles that's how you needed basically four people you needed 8 people carrying these 4 poles because each one was carrying it on either end. Tortini to tortini to tortini. And then it states, okay, 8 people were carrying one cluster. Echad nasa rimon, echad nasa teina. One carried the pomegranate and one carried the figs. Joshua and Kalev didn't carry anything. Because maybe they were too important to carry. They weren't part of the plan. They weren't part of the people who were giving this bad advice. So therefore they didn't carry. They knew that the people were bringing back this evidence were up to no good. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who says, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? According to Rabbi Yehuda, who said that it went 12 mil high, the Jordan River, when they crossed it, that they crossed over the way they were a camp. Camp was 12 mil. And so therefore, by the way, that's one of the things we have to determine in determining the location of Har Sinai. It has to be a place big enough for 12 mil. 12 mil is the size of the Bnei Israel to be able to camp. You don't have to wonder how many people there are. We know that their camp was 12 mil. So, and that's how they crossed, and that's why the water went up 12 mil high. We're on top of Ramadalman of days. But that they crossed over one by one, which is why it would take obviously much longer. We on this trip where 17 people, and it's like herding cats. Imagine how it is if you have hundreds of thousands of people to get everybody to cross. One person's got to go back. They forgot something in their room. Next thing you know, it's going to take years. So that's why he says it had to go. The Jordan River had to go piles and piles on top of piles. The Chadam are Bein Mar Ubein Mar. The Chadam are Bein Mar Ubein Mar Kechani Asanavru. That whether or not you say it was 12 mil high or mounds upon miles that they crossed over as a camp. Mar Savar Adam Kal. The one that says that they needed only 12 mil says that that's because the people are faster than water, and the one says it went piles and piles high. That's because the water is faster than people, so you need to give the people space to cross. Now, since we're talking about the Meraglim, a word I'm not translating here, it says Shlach L'cha Anashim. It says send for yourself spies. So Amar Shlach is Shlach L'cha Midatcha. God says to them, do it on your own opinion. Will a person choose something bad for themselves? Moshe Rabbeinu said the matter was good in my own eyes, meaning not in the eyes of God. And that's what Reish Lakish says. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want it. It wasn't what God didn't want it. It was in the eyes of Hashem and not the eyes of God. And it says, send for yourself spies and search out the land for us. These spies, these Meraglim, their intent was just to embarrass Eretz Israel. It says here that they scout out the land. Awesome. This is from Isaiah. That the moon will be ashamed and the sun will be embarrassed. And I'm embarrassed. I don't remember that exact reference, so we need to check that afterwards. And these are the names of the Meraglim. We don't know anything about these scouts. Some of them is like the only time they're mentioned in the Torah. So the Gemara is going to darish in the meaning of their names. We have a tradition that the spies got their names from their actions. And we only know one of their names, Setur ben Michael. Why is he called Setur? Because he contradicts the actions of God. Michal she'asa atzmo mach. The Gemara is using a euphemism to refer to God. He made gods. He attacked God. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Af anu nemar nomar. We can also say Nachbi ben Fafsi. We know what his name means. Nachbi shehichpi devarav shel Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He hid God's words. Ufasi shepiseya amidos shel Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He walked over the attributes of God. Vayahu ben Negev, and they came up through the Negev. Vayavo al Chevron, and they came to Chevron. What does it say? Vayavo mi bayolei. It should say they came. What does it say? He went to Chevron. Amarava Melamed shapirish kolev mi'atzas meraglim. Kolev went on his own to Chevron. He's separated from the council of the spies. He went to bow down and ask for help from his ancestors. He says, my ancestors request mercy for me. I want to be safe from the council of the Meraglim. Joshua, God already requested mercy for him. It says, Vayikra Moshe ben Nun Yoshua, which means God called Moshe called Joshua Yehoshua, meaning God should save you, that Hashem should save you from the council of the spies. And that's why it says, Kalev had a different spirit. He went in a different direction. Everybody else went one way. Kalev went in the other direction. We see from here that in order to be great, sometimes you have to go in a ruach hacharis. You have to go in a different direction. You have to go in your own direction. That's what we're trying to do today. A lot of people have not gone in this direction yet towards Har Sinai. We're following a new path. Baruch Hashem, Hashem Yisrael should help us this morning. And there they found in Chevron, Kalev found the Sham Achiman Shishai, by the way, but also another pshat that Kalev had Ruach HaCheretz. He went to get the Ruach of his ancestors. Even when you go in a different direction, you have to go with the direction of your ancestors, of your fathers, your grandfathers, your Zaydis, the Alter Zaydis, to show you where to go. The Sham Achiman Shishai v'Talmai. And there, when he went down to Chevron, Kalev found Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. They were the giants. Achiman, why was his name Achiman? Miyuman Shebachav. He was the strongest. Sheshai, Shemesim es haaretz kishchatot. That he would just, when he would walk on the ground, he would make it holes in it. We saw last night, unbelievable. I understood for the first time what I think really a sukkah was, because we were walking around the shuk in Tabuk, and then a woman says, come here and I'll show you a house for 10 reals, which is like $2. So we went into her house. This house she was showing us, it was a mud house going back 500 years. 500 years. They made it from mud and they covered it with straw. And I imagine that that's what the sukkahs were, that they were mud and they're covered with straw. That's what they lived in. Anyway, so when he walked on the ground, he made furrows in Chevron. Davar Achar, why was he... He made furrows in the ground. They built these cities. They were the children of the giants. They were so tall that the sun was like a necklace to them. So Chevron was built for 7 years before Tzoan in Egypt. So what do you mean it was built? If you want, it was actually built. Adam Bona Bias of no Katan, Kodam of no God, because Canaan was younger than Mitzrayim. So why would Canaan, Chevron, be built prior to Tzoan, which was in Egypt? It couldn't have been the case. So therefore, as it says, Uvnei Cham Kush Mitzrayim, and then Canaan was a descendant of Cham. Chevron was 7 times better than Tzoan. You have no rocky land worse in Israel than Chevron. The Kavri Bar Shechli, that's where you use as a cemetery. And you have nothing better than the rest of the land of Egypt, than the rest of the world better than Egypt, as it says, and there's nothing better in Egypt than so on, as it says, because there wasn't so on his ministers. Nevertheless, Chevron was built. Chevron was 7 times greater than so on. The Chevron to Rashimah. So Gemara says, was Chevron rocky? Was Chevron really rocky? Absalom says he's going to go to Chevron to get his sheep. He went to bring sheep from there. Betanya, that it says in the Brisa that the Ayalim in Moab and Kavasim in Chevron, that the rams came from, or the Elim, I don't know. The rams came from Moab and the sheep came from Hebron. So if that's the case, Hebron is producing the sheep. That means it's not rocky. How else are the sheep grazing? So the Gemara says, no, Minah. From there you learn it. I did the cliche ara. Because the land was rocky, it was bad. Therefore, they used it for grazing, and the flocks got fat. And then it says, they returned from scouting out the land. The Gemara says, but we're on top of Lamed Hey and Aleph. This word Vayalchu is superfluous. We compare their going to their coming. Just like when the Meraglim came back to the camp of the Jews, they gave them a terrible. And where did they come back to? They came back to the camp of the Jews. They gave them a terrible report. They went with the mission was doomed from the outside. I just want to do a couple more lines because it says in the next, we're coming up with something very important. They said that we went to the land and the ksiv efes ki azam. It was all worthless. Even though the land was very good, it was worthless because the people were so strong. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, any lashon hara doesn't have a little bit of truth at the beginning, nobody's going to believe. So even when you say a bad report about somebody lies, you stick in a little something good, true at the beginning. And Amar Rava sheisitan bidvarim. That it says Vayas Kalev Esam Kalev quite the people Moshe Amar Rava sheisitan bidvarim. He tricked them. Kalev tricked them. Pasach Yoshua, he said, Joshua started to talk to Kamishtai, and he started to speak. Amrle, Dain Rosh Katia. They said, let's not, this person, we're going to listen to him. He's a Rosh Katia. His head is chopped off, meaning to say, Rashi says, he doesn't have any children. We're going to listen to him, we're going to listen to him speak. Amar, Yimishtana, Amri Be Milsa, he says, if I'm going to defend Moshe, I'm going to say something and then they'll attack me. Amrlan. So he says to them, is this the only thing Ben Amram did for us? So Savri Beginuse Kamashai, they thought he was going to say something bad. Ishtiku, they were quiet. Amar Lahu, Hotzianu Mimitzrayim, he took us out of Egypt. Vikaralanu Wasayam, he split the sea. That's where we're going today, where he split the sea. And Vechilanu Wasaman, and he fed us the man. Maybe we're going to eat man today. We'll look for it in the wilderness. And then after that, Amar Yasu Sulamos Valu Rakia, Lo Nishmalu. He says, if he tells us to build ladders and go up to the sky, will we not listen to him? I will now have your rational. So we see from here that today's Daf Yomi, actually it's tomorrow's where we're going to be, saying the Daf Yomi at sunrise from Har Sinai, that was talking about Moshe Rabbeinu leading them out of Egypt, giving them the man, and saying, even if Moshe would tell us to build ladders to go up to the sky, we would believe it. So I'll stop the recording here and get such a geschmack.